The NHL trade deadline is passed. The Islanders stood pat, but that means they have some difficult decisions ahead, including what to do about one Brock Nelson. We're going to break down some of those decisions, all that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Thursday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. We have got a lot to discuss on today's show, some important decisions ahead for the New York Islanders organization. But first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can send us an email to lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we are happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever it is that's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you could follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all season long, and I am live tweeting during nearly every Islanders home and road game. So join me for some instant insight and analysis, and it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. So before we get into our main topic today, just a little injury update. Matt Martin back at practice Wednesday afternoon when the Islanders took to the ice in Buffalo. He did miss Monday's game against the LA Kings with a lower body injury. And according to Islanders head coach Patrick Roy, Martin is a game time decision tonight against the Buffalo Sabres. So still not sure if Matty Martz will be ready to go, but he is taking a step forward by actually practicing on Wednesday. So a little bit of encouraging news there. I wanted to discuss something that I first have to give a little credit to one of our listeners, and then I'm going to take his question and sort of take it a step further. This one comes from our friend Kevin, and he is a regular listener and asks plenty of questions via email. Some of them are mailbag questions, some of them not so much. But Kevin asks, Gil, good morning. Are any other players on expiring contracts are there any others that you think the Islanders should re-sign? And Kevin, I'm going to get to your question soon, but it sort of made me think a little bit more big picture, because the Islanders at the trade deadline, they had a whole bunch of different directions they can go to. And, there were those who were saying, oh yeah, sell. There were those who were saying buy big, and there were those who were kind of saying, well, let's wait and see. And then, of course, the team got hot right before the deadline, goes on the 6-game win streak. I think it was 4 at the time of the deadline, but either way, that plus the fact that the Islanders didn't have much in the way of prospects or picks and didn't have a lot of cap space. They had a little, but, you knew this team wasn't going to make a blockbuster move once that winning streak started. But one question that is coming up, some fans wanted the Islanders to trade Brock Nelson. And while I said there was a certain logic to that, I knew Lou Lamoriello wasn't going to do that. Even if the Islanders had gone on a 5-game losing streak before the trade deadline, they weren't going to trade Brock Nelson. But here they've stayed put, and Nelson is in an interesting situation because he has one more year left on his deal next season. But that means once this offseason comes, the Islanders can start negotiating an extension with Brock. And the question is, what do you do? Because right now, Brock Nelson is 32. He will turn 33 right around when the season starts. His birthday is October 15th. So you got to figure that, he'll be 33 when next season, let's say within a week after the season starts. And he is still your best goal scorer, leads the team right now with 29 goals. He's had back-to-back 30-goal seasons, 37 in 2021-22, 36 in 2022-2023. He's right now, with 18 games to go, on pace to equal or maybe even, if he gets hot, surpass that. Last year, he had a career-high 75 points. He may not reach that mark this year, but he'll be in the ballpark. Here's a guy who really has gotten better statistically with age, kind of like a fine wine. But here's the question. Do you talk extension with Brock Nelson and try to lock him up for another few years that he finishes his career with the New York Islanders? I wouldn't mind that, but caveat, again, from Lou Lamoriello's point of view, don't go giving a 33-year-old player who won't be, by the time any extension that is signed kicks in, he'll be 34. Don't go giving him a 7-year deal or even a 5-year deal. To me, you lock Brock Nelson in for 3 more years, 4 tops, knowing that you're going to probably get diminishing returns on the deal over the life of the contract. That, the first year, maybe 2, you'll still get, 30-goal Brock, and then maybe you go into the 20s, mid-20s. It doesn't get easier, as he gets to be 35, 36. So, I'd love to have Brock Nelson back beyond next year. That's one option. The other option is you don't re-sign him, see how the team is doing, and when you get close to the trade deadline, then you have that option. You can re-sign Brock Nelson, or if the team is doing poorly or needs some kind of a boost, you could trade Brock Nelson. At the trade deadline, a lot of people said, yeah, I don't want to trade Brock, but he'll give us the most back out of any of the players on our roster. And that was true. I think that Brock Nelson would have given the Islanders the most bang for their buck if they were going to trade a player. I almost think the second option of waiting until next year and seeing where Brock is at and where the team is at might make more sense, although you might be able to talk Brock Nelson and his agent into a little bit of a discount and say, okay, we don't want you to test the free agent market. We'll give you 3 years, but you got to take a little less money per year than maybe you were hoping for or expecting because, or we'll give you 4 years, but it's not as much money per year. There are ways to be flexible. I think holding off and not signing him to an extension right away makes more sense until we have a better idea of where the Islanders are at and where Brock Nelson is at. All of these things are important. And I still think, barring an injury or an absolute disaster where, Brock Nelson all of a sudden can't put the puck in the net anymore and just falls off a cliff, which I don't anticipate happening. You'll still get value for him next year if you want to trade him. and, you can hopefully lock him up to a reasonable deal for, 3, maybe 4 years at the most, preferably 2 or 3 years, and we go from there. So that's one big decision that the Islanders have ahead of them. But by all means, it is not the only decision. So we're going to briefly, as per Kevin's question, talk about some of the other potential free agents and potential players that the Islanders can negotiate with. We'll talk about all of those coming up. Plus, we have our Islanders birthday of the day, a New York City native who finished his career with 1 season on the island. His brother also played in the NHL. Let's see if you can guess who that is. And oh yeah, we'll preview tonight's game in Buffalo. And this is a huge game for the Islanders. We have all that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Regardless of where we are in the standings, I want to remind you that you can win big playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Barzal, McDavid, or McKinnon will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Islander fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit available to U.S. customers only. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So there are some other players out there who will be potential free agents and everydayers. Yesterday on the show, we did talk about one of those players, a separate question about Mike Riley. So you can go back and check that out if you missed it. Riley going to be an unrestricted free agent. And I sort of spelled out some of the conditions as to, whether or not that Riley will be back. Other unrestricted free agents. Well, let's start with Robert Bortuzzo, who as of right now remains on LTIR. He was picked up in a trade for a 7th round pick, 34 years old. To me, Bortuzzo, I'd welcome him back at or around the veteran minimum. But I don't think it's urgent that the Islanders re-sign him. He adds some size. He adds some physicality. He is a right shot defenseman, which is always something you want on your roster. They're hard to come by. So we'll see what happens with that. Sebastian Aho, also an unrestricted free agent. I Don't necessarily think he'll be back. If he does, it's less likely that Riley and Bortuzzo are back. To me, ideally, because of his lack of size, Aho is a seventh defenseman in this league. He gives you a little offense. He'll always have difficulty in his own zone because of size. So we'll see, what, if anything, happens with that. But Aho set to be an unrestricted free agent. I wouldn't put a high priority on him, but if he wants to come back again, Aho made $825,000. That's his cap hit this year. If he wants to come back at roughly the same amount, I have no problem with that. Cal Clutterbuck and Matt Martin, 2/3 of the identity line, both unrestricted free agents at the end of this season. I think it's probably about time for Matt Martin to hang it up. He's 34 years old, kind of slowing down a little bit. I don't think the Islanders should re-sign Matty Martz. He's been a great Islander. He's done his job exceptionally well. Good guy in the locker room. But I think that there are younger players who you can get for less money than Matt Martin to do his job. Same with Cal Clutterbuck. Clutter costs a little more at $1.75 million. Again, whether he would get that much if he sought to return. He'll be 37 next year. And even though he's still capable of playing, it may be time for the Islanders to move on from Cal Clutterbuck. Now, then you have 3 restricted free agents to watch. Kyle McLean, a restricted free agent. He does have arbitration rights, so that sort of puts a little monkey wrench perhaps into the negotiations. I would like to think that the Islanders will bring back Kyle McLean. I think he's done a solid job on the fourth line since the Patrick Roy decided to change things up with the line combinations. And one of the reasons it's worked is because of how well he's played on the fourth line. And then Oliver Wahlstrom, also a restricted free agent with arbitration rights. I don't think Lou Lamoriello is going to bring Wally back. I think a change of scenery probably benefits both Oliver Wahlstrom and the New York Islanders. Whether you do a sign and trade or you just let him go, that remains to be seen. But, Wahlstrom needs to be a top 6 guy. And, he just hasn't really found a role for himself on this team. Maybe if you feel like the knee injury has been the reason he's not playing very well this year, you take another flyer on him. But I think the time has come to move on. And then Simon Holmstrom is a restricted free agent without arbitration rights. I really would be surprised if Holmstrom doesn't sign at least a bridge deal with the New York Islanders. All right, more to get to on today's show tonight. 7 o'clock Eastern time, Islanders in Buffalo. This is a huge game. Don't forget, you could hear every minute of this game with the Islanders' hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. Just go to the SXM app and do a search for Islanders. We'll preview that game. Plus, we'll have our Islanders birthday of the day. All that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook, and that's FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You could even pick who's going to win it all. So don't worry about a busted bracket. Stick with FanDuel throughout the NCAA tournament. And you could also, of course, you could bet on pro basketball, and you could use your knowledge of hockey as well. Check out the odds for tonight's Islanders game. against the Buffalo Sabres. You got odds, prop bets, and the like. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check it out. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Islanders, Sabres, in Buffalo tonight. Again, 7 o'clock Eastern time start, and you can hear every minute of the game on SiriusXM with the Islanders' hometown broadcast. Go to the SXM app and do a search for Islanders. Buffalo, well, they're clinging to playoff hopes. 67 points right now in 66 games. So, they are 5 points behind the Islanders. Islanders have 2 games in hand. Buffalo's still going to try. Still, they've won their last 2, but they lost a few in a row before that. So kind of desperation time in Buffalo. They are a middle-of-the-road team, 21st in goals scored, 14th in goals against. Special teams have hurt the Sabres all year. The power play just 26. They convert 16.6% of the time. The PK, 20th. They kill 78.5% of opposing teams' power plays. As of late, and really all season long, Buffalo has gotten good goaltending from Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. He is 21-16-3, but a 2.44 goals against and a 9.14 save percentage. His backup right now, Eric Comrie, not as good. 1-7-0, a 3.91 goals against and an 864 save percentage. Now, Buffalo did the Isles a solid, basically by crushing the Detroit Red Wings by a final score of 7-3. But, again, in that game, you had Luukkonen in goal. Whether or not he is back in goal, I'd say that's likely. I do know the Islanders are going with Ilya Sorokin tonight. Right now, Rasmus Dahlin leads the team with 48 points. He is tied for the team lead in assists with 33. Casey Middlestat also with 33 assists. He has 14 goals. The 2 players tied for the lead in goals scored, Jeff Skinner and J.J. Paterka, both with 21. Tage Thompson has 19. Alex Tuch, 18. And again, balanced scoring, but not spectacular scoring in Buffalo. We look at the line combinations for the Sabres in their last game. Tage Thompson, Zemgus Girgensons, and Alex Tuch are the top line. Dylan Cousins centers the second line. Jordan Greenway to the left, Zach Benson to his right. The third line, Peyton Krebs pivots, Jeff Skinner and J.J. Paterka on either side of him. And then Tyson Jost is the fourth line center. Eric Robinson and Victor Olofsson are his wings. On defense, Bowen Byram and Rasmus Dahlin make up the top pair. Owen Power and Henri Jokiharju are the second pairing, and Jacob Bryson and Connor Clifton are the third pair. The goalies, as I mentioned, Luukkonen and Comrie, Matthias Samuelsson and Jack Quinn remain on IR. Look, the Islanders, this is a very, very important game. First of all, obviously, if you look at the standings right now, and there's no reason to not, this is very tight. And the Islanders, if the season ended now, they'd be again in the playoff spot, 8th playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, second wild card. Why? Because Detroit lost to Buffalo, and the Islanders have a game in hand, even though they're all even in points. So obviously you need this game. You win this game and in regulation, and you go up 7 points on Buffalo, and you have 2 games in hand. That really would more or less end Buffalo's uh, realistic hopes, at least, of catching the Islanders. You could also tie Tampa Bay in the standings, depending on how they do. And you could pull to within a couple of points of Philly, and you would still have the game in hand. So, a lot at stake here. There is just a whole bunch of teams right now. Philadelphia with 76 points, Tampa Bay 74, Islanders in Detroit with 72. Uh, Washington with 69, Buffalo 67, New Jersey 66, Pittsburgh 65. It's tight. It is tight. And, the Islanders also psychologically, I think you win against Buffalo, then the loss in LA is just, hey, we were tired. It was a back-to-back, third game on a West Coast road trip. Okay, we stumbled. We're back on track. You lose this game, and then you're like, well, we won 6 in a row, but now we've lost 2 in a row, and you start to sort of cancel out some of the effects of that winning streak. So for momentum, for confidence, and for the standings, this is a huge game for the New York Islanders. Let's hope that Patrick Roy has his team ready to go. Again, Matt Martin, a game time decision. I would assume if he can't go, Hudson Fasching will again be in the lineup. Time now for our Islanders' birthday of the day. And, we're a couple of days early, but Saturday will be the 62nd birthday of former Islanders forward Brian Mullen. Mullen, originally a 7th-round pick of the Winnipeg Jets back in 1980, made his NHL debut for Winnipeg in 82-83 after playing 2 years at the University of Wisconsin. And he put together some solid seasons in Winnipeg, including a 32-goal season in 84-85. That was his career high. Went on to play for the Rangers from 87-88 to 90-91, then joined the Sharks for a year and closed out his NHL career with the New York Islanders in 92-93, played 81 games with the Isles, 18 goals, 32 points, and added 3 goals and 7 points in 18 playoff games during that 1993 run to the conference final. A native of Hell's Kitchen, New York. His brother also, of course, playing in the NHL. His biggest game as an Islander, to me, April 20th, 1993. Patrick Division semifinal playoffs, Game 2. Islanders in the old Cap Center in Landover, Maryland to face the Capitals. Washington won Game 1 of the series 3-1. Glenn Healy, the goalie for the Islanders. Rick Tabaracci, the netminder for the Caps. And this game went to overtime. In fact, it went to double overtime. Dale Hunter tied the game with 3 seconds left in regulation on a power play goal. So it goes to OT, and who gets the game winner in double overtime, 14:50 of the second overtime period to be exact? Brian Mullen. Ray Ferraro and Patrick Flatley with the assist. Glenn Healy, 41 saves to earn the win. Islanders had 61 shots on goal to 45 for the Caps, but it was a huge, huge goal because it evened the series at 1 apiece, and it was one of 3 straight overtime wins for the Islanders, who would go on to win the series in 6 games. So Brian Mullen, New York native, he is our Islanders' birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day, everydayers. Tomorrow on the show, we will have our key takeaways from tonight's game against Buffalo, and we will preview a busy and important weekend of hockey ahead as the Islanders host Ottawa on Saturday afternoon and visit Madison Square Garden on Sunday afternoon to take on the Rangers. We'll preview both of those games for you on tomorrow's show. Until then, stay safe, everybody. Have a great day. And of course, let's go Islanders.